Okay.
We are live.
Hi, Daniel.
Welcome, Daniel.
Hello?
Hi, Daniel. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes. I'll just wait for my partner here to join us.
Okay. Give me 5 minutes. We have some people joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Bruno. Welcome.
Hi, good morning here in Brazil.
Well, it's afternoon in India, so good morning to you.
Nice to meet you. Buenos dias.
Yes.
Rajat, do you mind if we start? Others can join in later if they'd like to.
Okay. So thank you for the call, the opportunity to talk about the Brazilian market. Our expertise, it's more towards the real estate market here in Brazil and also in New York City. Uh, Bruno is my partner. He's the portfolio manager of all REITs in Brazil. So he might have a better view on the terms of valuation, etc., than I, because he follows this every day. I'm looking more in New York City, more at New York City. So before we start, if you have some questions to make, feel free to do it. then we can jump in the questions and explore them.
Sure.
Okay.
Raja, did you not have any questions?
In Brazil or United States, you are saying? Bruno, I'll talk about the REITs in US, and then if you can add in Brazil.
Okay, great.
So just to give you a big picture on the REIT market in US, we are talking about a market that is dropping around 15% this year compared to the S&P of around 5%. At the worst moment in this year, REITs lose, I would say, around 30 to 35% value. And but over the last one month, 45 days, the REIT market is recovering. Albeit this recovery, I believe that there is some opportunities there, because in terms of valuation, we are talking about a yield of 5%. This compared to somewhere around 400 basis point spread over the treasury, which is, we are talking about the highest level over the last 10 to 20 years. So this is an important metric in terms of valuation. Also, when we look at the discount to NAV, we are talking about 20%, which is still very compelling. And just to give you an idea, if the market is cheaper or not. Of course, this varies along the sectors. REIT market in US, you have, for instance, the data center market. This year is to 20%. So when you look at the lodging, we are talking about 30 to 40% lost. So it depends a lot on the sector that you are looking at. Some sectors suffered a lot during this crisis, as you guys know, such as retail, lodging, shopping malls, office, because REITs of office, they are very leveraged, and others haven't suffered so much, such as data center, infrastructure, and I would say even industrial and also residential that recovered a lot over the last days. In terms of the Brazilian market, Bruno, if you can... I think there is one audio here that, okay, is not mute.
Okay, talking a little bit about Brazilian market, we have a much smaller market than US, of course. Here in Brazil nowadays, we have around $12-13 billion market. Okay, so it is around 1 to 2% market in US, but this size, it's in the last 1 or 2 years, it double. Okay, so we have a $5 to $6 billion 1-2 years ago. So we are in a good way. Not only on size of the market, but about all the issues in the market, such like information to investors, types of class assets. So I would say that in the next 2 or 3 years, the size here in Brazil should grow like 2 or 3 times the time we have now. Okay, so talking a little bit more about our class here, the assets that are listed on Brazilian market, the major one still is corporate buildings. So it's like 30% of our markets, and these buildings, they are focused on the biggest city and the business city of Brazil, that is São Paulo. Okay, so it's around 100% like corporate buildings are in São Paulo, in the best regions in São Paulo. So that's the regions that we are investing. The market here in Brazil to corporate buildings, it is very different depending on the region you are. So if you go to Rio de Janeiro, it is a very, very difficult market nowadays. Rio de Janeiro is very dependent of oil and gas industry and government industry. So these two, both them are having problems in the last 1, 2, 3 years. And the city of Rio de Janeiro is not so dynamic about like São Paulo in terms of business and everything else. Okay, so São Paulo, it's a very, very different thing than the rest of Brazil in terms of real estate assets. Okay, talking a little bit about the performance of REITs in Brazil, that are fundos imobiliários, right? This year we have a minus 13 performance, that is overpassing our stock exchange here in Brazil, that is minus 18. So it's reinforced our view that REITs are much more conservative. It's much more it suffers in a different way in events that we are seeing right now. So historically here in Brazil, this relation about REITs to stock exchange is much better for REITs. And people here in Brazil, in general, they are knowing REITs now. Like we always had a very high taxa de juros, Malheiros, esqueci.
Interest rate.
Yeah, like we always had a high level of interest rate. It was difficult for Brazilians to move from fixed income to REITs. But now we have a 2% fixed interest rate here in Brazil, that we have never seen that, and we are seeing monthly this move. Even in March, April, there was the biggest stress here in Brazil, that like in the world. The number of investors to this market grow. So this is a very effective number, and let us with very good perspective to the market, but we still see some very particularly things in the class assets. So corporate buildings is the first one, and the second one, it is securities. So nowadays REITs, they are day to day getting bigger, and in some way being a funding, being the funding for a lot of companies here in Brazil, but we are just starting. That's the big picture. If you have any specific question, feel free.
Good. Guys, just one thing that is very important to bear in mind is that REIT in Brazil, in US, always outperform stock market. I'm talking about 20 years with less volatility. So this happened in US, and this is happening in Brazil as well. So invest in the real estate market here is something that we consider to be a good risk reward. Okay, so I think it's important.
Bruno, I have a question regarding REITs. Do you mind if I ask?
Yeah, no, go on.
Okay. So typically, when you invest in real estate or in properties, what is it that you look for? How do you determine its promise, its potential?
When we look for some investment here in Brazil, we look for good assets. Okay, RBR, our company, with Daniel and me, we are partners. We born like a real estate DNA company. So every time we do an investment, so if it is in corporate buildings, securities, shopping malls, we always look for good assets as collateral. Okay, so sometimes we prefer an IRR like 10, 12, or 15%, then and 20 to 30 IRR with non-core assets. Okay, so we always look for good assets and assets that we see that in the long term we can extract different returns, and much more than returns, that we have security to go on. That's the first line we look at: the location and the quality of the assets.
Okay. So where I'm from Mumbai. Residential properties have done very well in the past 3 decades. Do you expect such performance to continue even in Brazil, in Sao Paulo or other major Brazilian cities?
Yeah, residential here in Brazil, it's starting now. Some REITs are trying to go on with the first residential fund, residential rental fund here in Brazil, right? But it's a very it's starting now. What we do here, we build residential buildings here. We have like 15%, 25% of the AUM of RBR AUM. It is this sector, okay? But we build buildings, investing with construction companies, listed companies, in sometimes to build residential buildings, okay? But the residential rental, it's just starting, and we are looking for some of them. We have been talking at the last 6 months with like 10 companies that are trying to beginning. Their main problem, they always have a very good system. They are trying to structuring that operational company, and what we have seen is that they have a very huge problem to find good assets, real estate assets to do it. What we have seen and what we have studied, that's the big value of this game. It is in the operational company and not on the real estate assets. So we are trying to find a very good balance between the returns that the operational company will have and the returns that we will have at the real estate assets. So we are trying to fix this balance to move on. But we with nowadays with 2% interest rate, we are seeing, and we believe that in the next 1, 2, 3 years we will have a very big market to residential rental.
Understood. Thank you.
And it is very interesting because this is different from what we have, for instance, in US. RBI is, I would say, in a one-stop asset management firm. We invest in well-done projects, we invest in performing assets, we invest in debt in Brazil, and also invest outside Brazil, such as USA. And our investment thesis in USA is to buy residential properties. I think that the basic difference when we look at why this market is so developed in US and is not so developed in Brazil, because it is very expensive. It is very expensive there to take a loan and to buy a property. Here in Brazil, it's easier, I would say, believe it or not, to do that. And also, you have the demographics of the city, transportation, etc., that makes this equation a little bit different from Brazil to developed countries. I don't know if
Yeah,
it was,
an additional comment to that is that here in Brazil, we have a family culture to have to have the property in your name and not to live by renting. This is why we don't have in a very big size buildings that are owned by institutional individuals. So our call here is to do a very good portfolio of residential rental. We should, but it's not a thing that we have conviction yet. But I think that to build this a huge and good portfolio of residential rent, we should build buildings to own 100% of them, and with all the characteristics that reinforce their profitability. Okay, so we have a non-concentrated market. I think Daniel could give us some numbers about New York. Daniel, what is the percentage of real estate corporate buildings that are owned by institutionals and REITs in US, in New York, for an example?
I would say that when you look at the US commercial REITs, office REITs, 80 to 90% of the REITs, they are concentrated in New York
Daniel?
City. Hello, are you listening to me? Hello?
Yes, Daniel, we can hear you.
Hello?
Hello. Okay, so in terms from the office market perspective in US, I would say that 80 to 90% of the REITs invest in New York City, Boston, and also San Francisco. Those are the primary regions that those REITs invest. So most of the offices in, I'll say, not most of them, but there is a very representative number of buildings in New York that are owned by REITs. I don't know if it was that your question. I have a question here. How is the regulatory and legal environment right there with regards to the real estate markets? You are saying about US or Brazil? The regulatory market is very, I would say, strict. Just to give you an example, the foreclosure, it's going to depend on the region you are talking. In New York City, it's harder to foreclosure a property compared to Texas, for instance. So the foreclosure process would take somewhere around 2 to 3 years. So it's not very friendly, I would say. It's a strict process. And also, just to give you another example, in the residential market in US, you have something that they call regulated units. So around 30 to 40% of the residential properties in New York City, they are regulated. That means that you cannot increase the rent above inflation. And this is crazy. We are talking about probably the biggest city in the world, at least in terms of economy. And when we invest there, we do not invest in those kind of properties. Sometimes we acquire some properties that have one or two or three units that are regulated, which for us is something that is not good because you can't increase the rent. But you do have some regulation in US. When you look at, for instance, San Francisco, this happened as well. And we're going to say why you have some regulation. Prices increased a lot over the last 30, 40, 50 years. And a way that the government saw that it's not, I would say, intelligent to, to do is to freeze the rent. So we have some, I'm going to give you an example. We have a property there that has 8 apartments. 2 are regulated. One of them, the tenant pays $100 per month, and next to him, we have an apartment that, for the same size, that we charge $6,000. So this gives you an idea how the market is regulated in US. Of course, that other sectors such as office, warehouse, etc., they are not so regulated. But in terms of residential, they are regulated. No, not yet. Our very intent to be a global asset management firm, but we are not looking at the Indian real estate market. It's true. Guys,
What city typically invest?
Sorry?
What cities of Brazil do you typically invest in?
In Brazil, we invest especially in São Paulo city and also Rio de Janeiro. But I would say that São Paulo comprises around 80% of our total investment.
Okay.
What is your opinion on Blackstone REIT? I have no opinion on that. I need to study better before I give you an opinion on Blackstone REIT. Are you guys intending to invest in the Brazilian market? I mean, the real estate market, or is just a stock?
And what's the idea? Is to understand the real estate market worldly, Brazil, US, and try to take that intelligence and use at your own market there, or the idea is to invest here or US? What's the idea of you guys?
Well, Bruno, honestly, the objective was to learn more about REITs because in India it's at a stage of nascency. A real estate market, these REITs are at a stage of nascency, so we're trying to better our understanding, and maybe then we can take a decision.
Okay, that's a
I
good
hope
decision.
I've answered your question.
Yeah, sure. And how it is nowadays, the REITs market in India? What's the stage that you are now? What's the size that you have there? How it is beginning?
So I'll answer this question. In India, the market for REITs has not developed as efficient and as effective it is in America. And right now, what has happened is over the course of the past 2 to 3 years, the government has been trying to has launched a scheme for affordable home buying for all the poorer sections and underprivileged sections of the society. And we have also brought in a new regulation in 2016 which seeks to regulate promoters and other builders because they used to enter into fraudulent transactions, and they didn't used to hand over possessions. So we have brought in a new regulation. The government has brought in new schemes for affordable housing, and we have also amended our taxation laws for REITs. We have had an investment from Blackstone REITs at Bengaluru last year, but as of now, domestically, we are yet to see a huge market. As of now, that's it.
What is the return in India market? What is the yield that you have there right now?
Sorry, I'm unaware of that at the moment.
How big is the market in India? I mean, in Brazil, you are talking about $20 billion market value.
Are these listed REITs?
Yes.
Okay, so we have just a couple of listed REITs in India. One is a collaboration between.
Okay.
We have just a couple companies that are listed here in the REIT section. One is a collaboration between Blackstone and an Indian firm.
Okay, so it's a very small market in India. It
Correct.
also is not growing. Is not growing.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, in Brazil, this market, I would say that is, as Bruno mentioned early in this call, it's growing a lot. We tripled our size in the last 3 years. And the number of people that is investing in REITs here is growing every day. And this is especially due to the low interest rate environment we have in Brazil, as well as I would say few supply coming to the market over the next years that makes prices appreciate, as well as we have a lower taxation. And this is an important driver for the sector. Low is zero tax on the income that investors receive per month.
Daniel, what's the interest rate for business loans in Brazil?
The interest rate here is 3%, and the government is predicting to decrease to 2.5, 2.25% over the next 15 days.
Okay. So have you seen a significant reduction over the past few years?
Sorry?
Has there been a significant reduction in the interest rate over the past few years?
Yes. Back to 2016, the interest rate reached 14%, and since then, interest rates has been falling, especially because there was a big change in the previous government, which was, I would say, a left government. Now we are more a central to right government, and this brought a lot of confidence to investors, and accompanied to the fact that the inflation also was still low, and this made the interest rate drop to 14% to 33% over the last 4 years.
Yeah, before this COVID problem, this health problem, our fiscal policy and monetary policy here in Brazil, we were in a good way to have a very good growth, economic growth here in the next years. So we have a very, very, very good economic team in the government. Of course, after this health problem about after COVID, we and I think almost all countries will have some fiscal problem but we were, and I still believe that we still are going in a very good shape, to have a very good performance in the next years here.
Good to know. Do you plan to release any more REITs? You have 4 listed on the exchange, right?
Sorry?
Do you plan
Yes.
to? I'm sorry, Daniel. Go ahead.
Yes, we have 4 REITs in the stock exchange, and we plan to raise more REITs.
Yeah, the idea here is more than have more REITs is to grow our REITs. The industry here in Brazil beginnings with small REITs, and sometimes with just one asset. That's a very difficult, different market than US that you have.
Bruno? Guys, are you listening to Bruno? Because I can't.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you, Daniel.
Bruno, I believe that you have some problem with your.
So nowadays we are talking about follow-ons, to grow our REITs. This will be a very good movement in order that you have multi-class investments. You have REITs that invest in corporate, in securities, in shopping malls. So you have a more diversified portfolios and with much more liquidity in the secondary market. I don't know if I answer your question. I think so.
It does. It does. That's a reasonable answer. In the residential space, do you invest in luxury properties or affordable housing?
In affordable housing and mid and high segment, in the last years, we focus on affordable housing because it was a best performing market. We have some subsidies, some an incentive from government with some incentives, for this market. So we focus on it. But in the last 1 year or 1 year and a half, we started to come back to mid and high segments. Of course, that depending on the economic growth that we have here, we should go back to affordable housing. But we were starting to look for the high segment again.
Got it. Thank you so much, Bruno. Do we have any questions, guys?
Daniel, have you some final questions?
From my side, no. I don't know if you guys want to talk more about the Brazilian market, or also, I would say, New York market. Guys, any more questions?
I think that is all from my side. Rajat Bhai, Harshit, any questions?
Are you guys considering to invest here in Brazil?
No questions. Thank you. Gracias, everyone. No questions from as of now. But if you could provide your mail ID, we could ask some follow-up questions. Maybe now, maybe sometime in the future. Maybe even express our interest in investing in the Brazilian and American markets.
Okay. If you have any doubts about RBR, I recommend our website rbasset.com.br. We started this week a new website, so it deserves you to have a look there. You will look all the information about our partners and about our company and our DNA. Okay. Thank you very much for the conversation. Have a good afternoon there.
Thank you, Bruno. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
We'll stay in touch if you're interested.
Just one question.
Learning more about the market.
How is the coronavirus spreading in India?
It's bad. The city I'm in, it's on a complete lockdown.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, I'm from Mumbai. It's India's finance, and we've had restrictions for the past 70 days.
Oh. Okay, guys, take care.
How is it in Sao Paulo?
It's been pretty bad, but it is improving. I think the number of deaths is stabilized as well as a new infection, right, Bruno?
Yeah.
I think we are flattening the curve right now.
Good to know.
Okay, guys, so stay safe and healthy.
You too. Thank you again. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.